All right. Hello again. Pardon me for a moment. I have forgotten to set this up. Here we go. It's official now. Hello, it's Chad Everett Brochures. I'm the author of the Human Manual and the more uh, quickly approaching the Introduction to the Human Manual books, as well as I am the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. Today, I'm going to talk about why we argue, or arguments versus communication. Now, actually, at the very beginning, right out of the chute, uh, oh, disclaimer should be up about here, right about there on the screen. After I finish the very little editing I do is actually just adding the annotations to the video. So the disclaimer just tells you I'm not a medical person, or am I even? I mean, I'm educated in the medical field, but I'm not replacing anything in the sense of doctor or any physician or anything like that. I'm just giving you the viewpoints of the philosophy from the Human Manual, as well as my developmental programs and my education. So with that, let's move into this. So the first portion is argument versus communication, just to make some distinction on that. Arguing from the position of me against you, or whatever, us against them, whatever that factor may be. I do not mean that arguing is not a form of communication. What I mean by communication is being able to hear the person you're speaking with, understand their position, and then being able to relay your position without getting emotionally charged to the point of rejecting what the other person is stating, or taking it personally to the point where you are drastically upset. So, arguing versus civil communication, I suppose, would be a good term for it. So what is it? What causes arguments? Right, so communication is whenever somebody says something, you hear it, you understand it, and you bring it back to that person, and or bring it to a new audience. It's still communicating something. All right. So arguing. What are the main reasons why we argue? Well, one of the first things is just understand there's a subject we wish to understand. We also want the other person involved in the conversation to understand our position. Now, there are variables in this, as far as I want you to understand my position, and I want to understand your position enough that I care to express it. A lot of people enter into conversations, or it's common to enter into a conversation with the belief the person will harbor your own viewpoint or will convert to your viewpoint. That's the standard layperson's position in arguments or conversations. They usually go into a conversation, they communicate a bit, and then as soon as they find out that there's a deviation between the viewpoints and the worldviews or philosophies between that person and another, that now it becomes an argument, rather than, I don't really understand your viewpoint, or can you further elaborate on why you feel that way? There's very little curiosity into understanding the other person, because we have been conditioned a great deal, or left into our own devices in the wilds of suburbia, to understand how to communicate or to have conversations with people. We may resort to arguments and not have the intention for resolve to the argument, other than proving your point's right, their point is wrong. That's part of looking good versus looking bad. I want you to understand that I'm saying what I'm saying because I want you to adopt my view, no matter what. At the end of this, if you don't adopt my view, the conversation's a failure. A lot of people they say this is the common way people are approaching that particular that particular viewpoint. It's common. I see it regularly. I interact with people that regularly have that belief that, if the conversation does not conclude with that person's citing to your belief point, not seeing it from your view, but actually adopting your view, then it was a failure and a waste of time, or whatever. Because a lot of people have a lot of false narratives that they live into. All right, so we don't have to agree. We don't have to disagree. My desire is to understand where you're coming from so I can better understand your worldview, so that, or your viewpoint on whatever subject, so that I understand how your life works for you. And then conversely, I also like to offer how my life works for me, but only to an open audience. If you're not open to it, then, it's not that I don't work on enrollment. I just recognize that you may not be ready for that conversation. I don't run into that particular experience very often. Most commonly, I run into people that are willing to open their mind to something. Very seldomly do I come across somebody who is an absolute shut-off no to anything, or you'll have to jump through amazing hurdles and barriers in order to get the other person to consider your viewpoint. I rarely run into that. Now, I am very good friends with someone who has something close to that. It's hard or challenging to share anything immediately with this person in particular, just because he has a very set place in his mind about the way things work, and there's a dismissal that that I may not know what I'm talking about, or I don't get it, and I don't have a right to get it, in a sense. Like, just consulting with the death of a family member. I've lost quite a few of my family members, and being able to consult with the person, as we knew that that particular family member for him was terminal, and the result was, I've got it taken care of, I've done that already, and then after the fact, there's a lot of unresolved things that he's continuously haunted by. So there's that was put in the way. It was a hurdle that I had to overcome. At that time, I just said, I don't care, I'm going to share it with you. But since then, I still share, but I realized that there is a series of hurdles that I have to overcome in order to actually get a clean space in his mind in order to communicate without being shut down. I'm not politically active in any way, and this particular person has a great deal of interest in politics. So if I ever mention anything about a person's character involved in politics, I usually have a hurdle to jump over, that he's aware of my level of influence and desire of politics as a whole. And he pretty much presents that as a hurdle I must get over in order to establish that it's a human being that I'm speaking about, not a political party. So as part of that goes, I mean, we all have people like this in our lives, and I am no exclusion. So, and I don't lead that to argument in any way. I'm not too big an argument. I am open to debating. I love debating, actually, but debating is more of a very structured form of communication if the two people debating are very honest intellectually. So if you're intellectually honest, you also understand that there's degrees of things that you don't know as well as what you do know. And then there's things that we don't know. So there's plenty of open opportunity for development and growth. That's why I actually enjoy debates. You hold your position, you create the passion you need in order to facilitate that position. And then we talk about the concepts of that between our two viewpoints. And then we come to a very interesting outcome in the conversation, nearly always. Actually, the more challenging for me are religious debates, as far as achieving an outcome where both people walk away with a great satisfaction and communication. Outside of that, though, as far as any other type of conversation, I've rarely run into anything where we haven't developed a significant and wonderful position as an outcome to that particular conversation. So, looking good and looking bad. The reasons why we poise ourselves emotionally in a conversation is, if you have a story that you're intellectual or you're a smart person, then you have some character to defend. And if you don't do enough of your homework on a particular subject, you can very easily, especially if you're not willing to be intellectually honest or emotionally honest or anything, any factor of honesty, then you are likely to get defensive about your position. The more defensive or the quicker to emotion usually indicates that the more vital but yet soft that particular argument may be, or ill-prepared, or the challenges and nuances that actually make this that makes us not understand it completely in our own mind, makes us defensive of those areas because we're not willing to attack or even direct our attention to those areas so much as because we cherish the idea, even though there's something that's logically not fully connecting. So we get emotional about that missing piece, or that piece that's soft and malleable, to the point that it doesn't fully make sense. So we kind of leave that as an opportunity of understanding and step over it. And if it gets close to being stepped on, it's sensitive to us. So we're likely to become very upset by the fact that somebody has made us aware of or attacked an area that's a weak link in our viewpoint. So we have a position of trying to protect something. And inside of that position of trying to protect something, we have the looking good and looking bad to that protection. Now, on the other, this is a different perspective than some of the other educations on looking good, looking bad. But as far as looking good means that you have a good argument to protect that particular area of your philosophy that is kind of weak, or that is kind of soft and challenging. And it doesn't have to be full-on philosophy. You could look at it from just a stance of actions that you've taken, but all your actions will fall in suit with whatever your philosophy of life is, whatever your viewpoints and ideals are for success. So if you have something that you're having this argument over, something that you may say is fairly petty, what happens with petty arguments? Petty arguments are simple, that they are clues to a bigger picture. There's clues to something else. So if you're quick to argue about something that we would call petty, which means that it could be just semantic, it could just be a choice of the way we use a particular word, not necessarily falling into the linguistic values, but just more about just the semantical values, meaning that there's really little attached to the word's definition, and we just use specific words without real intention. But in linguistics, that's actually another subject that can kind of supersede that particular statement. But for the semantical values, we'll just stay with that for the moment. So if you have this little bit of an argument that's considered trivial, and it's a regular occurrence that doesn't seem to go away, that's part of a bigger picture. And you may have a drastic philosophy difference between your partner or this person and yourself, or a viewpoint and desire for outcome in life, of ideal of success, that can very well be challenged between the two of you. And this is where we get to the point where my viewpoint's better than your viewpoint. I look better. Your viewpoint is not as good, so therefore you look bad by comparison to me looking good being right and you being wrong. All right, so as far as the argument continues, the challenge itself lies inside of looking good and looking bad. Oh, but it doesn't lie inside of it. That's a challenge point. So larger challenges actually lie ahead. And that if you're arguing over what kind of soap you guys just bought, there's something deeper there that's not just soap, right? There's a disagreement. Maybe you feel a lot of this has to do with our experiences of the past, and pretty much I would say that all of it has to do with our past experiences. Whether that past experience is something desirable, like you had this wonderful relationship and you lost your partner for whatever reason, maybe they left or they died or whatever, and this new partner isn't living up to that past experience, and you see that that new partner of yours is trying to take control of the relationship. Very few people like to lose control outside of like some sexual fetishes. Very few people do like to lose control. So there's a looking good about being in control and a looking bad about not being in control. So if you're sharing with somebody else, it makes you look weak, or whatever connotation you put to that. So if you're sharing with somebody and they think that you are being dominated or controlled in the relationship, it may look bad in your mind to that person's viewpoint of you, and therefore damages your credibility or your character with them. And so you mount a defense to try to affect this before it gets to the point that you've given up that kind of control. So these little arguments could be control battles where I'm just, this relationship has to go my way, not your way, right? That's us versus them. So some of these are all parts of fractures in the foundation of relationships. So now this isn't just relationship, intimate, boyfriend, girlfriend, or boyfriend, or any of those other variables that may play into a relationship as far as an intimate relationship with a partner. But this is the fractures in all relationships. So and the fundamental beliefs of the relationship, there is, I should be this, right? So I've mentioned before in other videos about people that want to be, that want to play the role of being a victim because there's a payoff in being a victim. Everyone knows victims. Everybody knows victims. For the most part, I mean, I haven't spoken to every person on the planet, but because it's so prevalent in my life and in the lives of the people that I've consulted with and that I've also have been involved in their training, that everybody knows the victim profile. Everybody also knows a conqueror's profile, and everyone else knows, or everybody also has met somebody with a champion's profile. There's so many different types of profiles out there that people know these individuals. It's just you may not know how to identify that particular mindset or that particular mental profile. So a victim always has to have a villain. There always has to be somebody victimizing the victim. You've heard people that like to position themselves as victims, and they do it regularly. Actually, it's one of the most consistent things you see on television is there's a lot of victims out there. And also there's a lot of conquerors out there, and there's a lot of champions out there overcoming adversity or finding adversity and then overcoming it. Usually it's the latter, not the former. They go out and find the adversity, they develop it, they create it in their own life, and then they overcome it. Like, the relationship factor. You could also transition from a victim into a conqueror or a champion by simply, overcoming the relationship only to find yourself in another one. But usually you leave that relationship that you were in and you tell yourself very convincingly, never again will I be in a relationship like that. So moving on for now in my life, I will never date another person like that. And then 6 months to a year or however long later, you're dating the same type of person again. But yet you climbed out of being a victim and was a conqueror of that relationship, or you conquered the challenge only to find yourself in it again. Or even worse for some people, finding themselves in a situation that they cannot understand how to navigate through. And they keep trying to victimize themselves because it's the most comfortable place for them. They know the profile so well that you can make your partner into a villain very easily, or people in your life into a villain. Something's coming to mind as far as a way of explaining, or something that you may have experienced is, say somebody comes along, they're late, they parked in a spot that was not allowed to be parked in or whatever, so it was susceptible to getting a parking ticket. They run up to this position, this job, or whatever it is, their appointment, scurrying and scrambling and just in their head going on and on about how somebody held up the shower too long, or maybe if that light that I got stuck at wouldn't have turned red, I would have made it on time, or whatever. All right, and they're disheveled or whatever it may be, either in mind or in body or both. And they show up, they have all kinds of excuses to why they didn't make it on time. They blame everything they can to try to convince the person they're sitting with of who is responsible for their latency. And then they go back downstairs to find that there is a traffic citation or a parking citation on their vehicle because they parked in a location that was not accepting of that parking. So it wasn't permitted. Then this person tells everyone or their friends or whomever that, can you believe this happened to me? Right? I can't believe this happened to me. It's just my day. Right? If they don't have a clear, distinct, or there's a clear, distinct person to blame it on, or there's too many people to blame it on, they'll just blame their day as if their day is responsible for it. That is the profile of a victim. So that's not just the only profile. That's an example of a profile of a victim. Or not the only example. There's plenty of them. So with that, those are the places that we have fundamental beliefs of how a relationship's supposed to go. These are subconscious interactions that we have with other people. We learn this at a young age, where we learn that you should behave a certain way to get attention, in which way, and that attention either is exactly what you wanted or indirectly what you wanted, but ultimately pays off by the attention you want. So not everybody wants a pity party, but yet there's people that thrive in pity parties. If you ask them, they'll tell you, I can't stand pity parties, but all of their actions bring them back to creating the celebration of a pity party. Right? Like, that guy's such a dick. I can't believe blah, 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 whatever. And then it's like you get surrounded by people that are just patting you on the back going, it's okay. It's all going to be better. It's all going to be okay. And you get stuck in this downward spiral, or this continuous vicious cycle That is, I don't like it when people acknowledge or just treat me that I'm, like a victim or whatever. It's usually people come to that at some point in time in their life where they feel that I don't like being treated like a victim. But ultimately, they're the ones who've been making themselves out to victims their whole life, or have been doing it for a long enough time period that they realize they don't like people treating them that way. But ultimately, they do like it because they wouldn't keep doing it if they didn't. It's the best, most effective way they know to get attention. Now, it's not to make villains of these people either. It sucks whenever you've been villainized and, because you decided to be in a relationship with someone. But it's not to say that they don't have fault in it. It's just to understand that they don't have the maturity necessary to get out of it. And that's part of what happened with them growing up in the wilds of suburbia. They didn't have somebody to actually help them get through that. So they learned it as best they could in the most effective way they could with what they knew. And it paid off to a degree, and they kept doing what paid off. Excuse me. Woo, baby. Yeah, good one. All right. So the fractures in our belief systems in a relationship, as we continue to fracture these beliefs, or we get these fractures where we get emotionally charged in conversations that lead to arguments, then we have the opportunity to continue to collect evidence to why we should defend that, right? Most people don't look at it like maybe it is something that's incomplete or incompatible with my world of view or my desired goal, my ideas of success. They don't really look for what caused it in the first place. Like, is it a truth, or is it something that you just adopted as a bulk buy? Like, you just bought this palette of ideas and you didn't really look at every single one of them, but you said, you know what, because the outcome is this in the afterlife, or the outcome is this as far as my life and success, or the outcome is whatever it is, I'm going to go ahead and just accept all of this palette of information, right? This big bulk buy of a viewpoint or a philosophy. And you haven't really explored the whole philosophy. You haven't gone on your nature trails. You haven't walked the path of your philosophy just yet. You haven't found all the little places that it actually doesn't necessarily have complete compatibility for the ways you've experienced life. So these things are fracturing your beliefs. Now, when those beliefs are fractured, you have your evidence to defend it. And that's where your character gets involved in defending the fracture of that belief system. So if the belief system is challenged and you're fractured and you're collecting evidence to how to defend your belief, you're looking for the weak points and trying to build armor around something weak. It doesn't mean that that weak point is going to have the strength to hold up the armor. It just means that you're trying to do what you can to deflect it, but it's non-mobile, it's non-functional, it's non-dynamic, it is not capable of surviving on its own. So we look for these cracks, we collect evidence. Now that evidence is a story that we have about ourselves. Now it starts to work into the story about ourselves, where our philosophy becomes collapsed with who we are as a human being. And then we live into this upset that somebody is attacking our philosophy. Somebody is attacking us when they attack our philosophy. When they attack our viewpoints, our desires, our ideas of success. Whenever somebody says something against your viewpoint, you feel like it's an attack. Or if somebody says something that doesn't line up, it doesn't even have to be aggressive or even formulated in any way that is an attack, but they just don't adopt your view. As I mentioned earlier, people that actually go into the conversation expecting that you harbor their belief, and if not, the conversation's only successful if they walk away with you taking your belief, or with them taking your belief. That's a very poor version of a debate or an argument. It's more of an argument, but not so much of a debate necessarily. It's not structured. It doesn't have a fair basis or a common basis to desire some sort of outcome. Both people usually do want to leave believing that the other person will take their belief system or their belief and abandon their own or modify their own to fit the new one that I just offered, but not willing to necessarily listen to the other person's view and want that person's view to be acceptable as far as their philosophy is concerned. So evidence collecting. So there is the current relationship that you're collecting evidence for and how that relationship isn't going the way you want it to. Then there is the story of ourselves about the relationships. so that what it is about me in the relationship, am I continuously not able to defend my position? I'm more likely to get emotional and then argue from that rather than communicate with you, immediately infecting other people with your views or with what you think they're going to say based off of past experiences. Oh, there is you versus them. All right, that's the position that I've been discussing for a while, or for the most of this video at this point, is us, myself versus you, right? Or you versus whoever you're in the conversation with, or you versus me. That's arguing. That's not communicating. No, not communicating with a desire of understanding one another. That's more of I'm against you, you're against me. It is warfare in language. So there's us versus them. If you're on my side, who else is on our side, right? Most of the time, no one else is on our side, so we need to attack anyone else who's not. And it's not about communicating and understanding somebody else's viewpoint and wishing to come to a better understanding so that we can get along and live cohesively. We have to say, you know what, I don't believe you and you don't believe me. So if we continue this argument, we'll probably have a fight. Right? We'll have a fight to some degree. If those fights are in words, it's arguing. If those fights are in the physical body, then, you know, it's fighting. If the fight turns into, you know, multiple people against each other and they're getting physical, now we're talking about a battle, right? And then it could ultimately lead to a war. You can see this in nations, differences in beliefs in nations. So at this point, I've rambled on for a bit. I must get to my next appointment. I hope that there is some clarity in this video. I know that I've discussed a lot. I had a lot to say, and this may not be necessarily the best video I've done at this point, but it is one with intention to be as fulfilling for my intention as possible, which is just to give a little insight of furthering the insight on arguing versus communications with the intention of common understanding at the end, more so than common understanding that we're going to agree to disagree. No, I hear your point and I don't agree with it, but that's okay. Tell me more about why you have that point. So that was the intention of this video. I hope that was well reached. If you like what you've heard, please share it. Subscribe. You'll catch every video whenever it's coming up. It'll give you an announcement so long as you don't turn that off. Also, thank you much for your time. And, you know, you can share this on Facebook or any other, you know, media source, as well as you can email it. There's a lot of different ways to share these videos. I appreciate all of your support, all of the watchers, everyone who's watched the video, as well as grateful for my audience. So with that, guys, boys and girls, this is Chad Everett Broshears. I'm the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia, and this was Arguing versus Communicating. Now, enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. Look forward to our next video.